And like you said, you've worked with a lot of different brands. And Amanda, this is a question for you as well. You guys have worked with clients, brands, and companies from all around the world. What, how do the expectations of a portfolio change depending on where you are? Like, what are the expectations for a portfolio in Canada compared to the UK or Cannes, where you worked as well? Yeah, what are the different expectations for those?
I'll start by saying that I think you have to really understand who's on the other side and it'll change depending on what country. So for instance, in the audio industry, CBC is very highly regarded in the US. So if I was gonna use that example, when I am sending it to my portfolio to a potential client across the border, then including a CBC is nice. They'll recognize that name, it carries that weight. Whereas maybe some of the nonprofits we work for that are known in Canada are not as known across the border. So you just have to have that lens. But I do think in the media industry between Canada and the US, the portfolio format and what is being looked for is very similar. And same with the UK. And CBC is a great example for that. In the UK as well, they understand CBC is like their BBC. So again, that translates really well. But perhaps they wouldn't recognize CIBC as a bank, right? So just even though we know that really well, they might not. So if you do still want to put that portfolio piece, just add that explainer into the context. So if I was going to send it overseas, I would say, this is one of the biggest banks in Canada. And so even just that little line will catch their attention. So I think context really helps.
And then if I were to put Live Fridays, I would say that this is one of the biggest podcasts
Of
in
course.
Canada. And, okay. And Kesava, how has it changed for you?
It's been honestly a trial and error, and it's still something that we figure out day by day. For some reason, the East loves text a lot more than the West does. That's one thing I've always noticed. Yeah, I mean, they're like, "Oh, this is a great video. Can we read more about it?" I'm like, "But that's the video." I mean, it's really interesting. But I think to echo a lot of the important points, you have to know the person on the other side. Also, and this is the weirdest thing ever. Big brand doesn't mean it's the right thing on the portfolio. I'll give you an example. Like, we worked with some major brands, and what we have to realize is that the person and this also depends on what stage you're in. If this is like your first time intro, sure, put the big brands on there, get that brand equity. But as you are in the process of figuring out how to work with the client, from then on, your journey is all about giving them enough of a portfolio to help them contextualize what this agency or what this individual could do for me. So I'll give you an example. We had a sport client we work a lot of cricketers. So cricket's a huge sport in the East, and it's one of the biggest, fastest growing sports in Canada. It makes no sense for me to go and give them what I did for TD Bank or PwC. They're like, "Oh, it's a great name, but what does this have to do? I have a bat and a ball, and I have a great sportsman," right? So sometimes, especially once you're past that, hey, you're great enough for me to talk to you. From then on, in our opinion, in our trial and error, everything is about giving them the most amount of context to feel that if this person were to work on my stuff, what can they create? And I think sometimes we miss that because, let's be honest, we all have a little bit of an inferiority complex. We always want to make people feel like, oh, we are the best here. We are, but the thing is, the best way to be the best for someone is by actually looking at things from their perspective. Take the space to understand, that's the person that I need to work with. Let me get into their world. Let me get into the meetings that they have to have with their bosses to get them to be convinced that, Chrysalis is the greatest person to work on this, right? So I think, remember that your biggest work is always not the best work to present. Always look at it from the perspective of who is on the other end.
So sort of showing the journey of what it's like for a brand or a person to work with you, and how they've.
And also think about, like, you put yourself in that almost like role play in their shoes and think, okay, this is their expectations that they're outlined. If they had to be convinced by me, and they have to connect me to their need, what are the pieces in my portfolio to present? Is really the perspective that we have over time learned, and it's been paying dividends ever since.
Okay.
And Alan, I want to add to that, like, speaking on that journey note, I've even had students who've applied to internships with Lead Podcasting, and they've linked me to an entire Google Drive of multiple folders, and it's like overwhelming for me, and I don't even know where to begin. So just think, putting yourself in their shoes and going, all right, if they click this link, where would they click first? Even if you are going to go link to a drive, which I think is not the best way to present work, have one folder that says start here, and think of that user experience of like, all right, they're going to click here, then what opens up, right? And really go step by step as if you were on the other side receiving it, and make sure it's really clear that they're clicking in the order and in the way that you'd want them to.
I will remove my portfolio from Google Drive immediately.
And if I could just add a quick note to that, firstly, I think anybody and everybody that wants a portfolio should actually have a website.
Yeah.
It's very easy to do. Like 20 years ago, yeah, a website would be a bit of a pain, but with all the modern applications you have, it's as easy as a drag and drop because you have to create an intentional centralized experience. And the other thing about portfolio, and I learned this the hard way too, because I had a website, but I didn't have the drive link, but it was a lot of like, let me put my work front and center. But I consider portfolio a little wider than just your work. Like one of the most important things as equivalent to your work is your, for example, artist statement. I always tell my students that, like, make sure your artist statement is front and center, because that is the zone that you're taking me into to visit, the entirety of your work or the select works that you have. Even things like thought leadership, like people, oftentimes I've been in situations where I'm like, do I really have something to say? We all have something to say. We live and breathe on this world every day. We experience art in different ways, and we all have something to say. So even having a centralized experience, social media or websites, like, think of your work being select, front and center, but you also need all these pieces, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We engage with art, we work with other human beings. So think of your portfolio as not just a drive link with your best work, but really an experience into understanding you.
Sure.
Right?
But I think a lot of people have this problem, is creating a portfolio can feel very daunting and pretentious, and sort of having that self-branding, it just doesn't, you can feel a bit arrogant sometimes and shy to put your work out there. What advice do you have for that? Because I know, especially like as a person, as a creative, you're constantly changing, trends are constantly changing, so like nothing ever stays as relevant as it would be when you first made it. And on top of that, just feeling like, I don't want to put myself out there, I don't want to talk about myself. How do you get over that, if you can? How do you deal with that?
Okay, so a couple tips from me. Number one is ask other people what they think of you and get them to say it. So you could ask your teacher to write you a testimonial. They might write you reference letters, but just ask for like 2 or 3 sentences that you could use on your website if you haven't had any clients yet, or if you have done some volunteer work or even a student association, get a testimonial from some of your peers, people that you've reported into, and that could be a starting point. And that's also looks really professional when you incorporate it into maybe a website or even an email that you're sending off, pitching yourself. Another thing I think is take baby steps. So you don't have to have this entire 5-page website built out. Like, I'm just gonna try to build the homepage, and know that it's being a web and you're not like sending it to print. It can change. You could put it up for a day and sleep on it and then see how you feel the next day. And so even me myself, I just literally this morning changed the photo on my homepage of my website because I was like, I actually don't like it. I want to switch it. Like, that will never end. And there's always going to be more pictures and more things and different ways to tweak it. But just know it's a constant iterative process. You're never locking in, and give yourself some grace and be gentle with yourself around that. Like, put something up, see how you feel, sleep on it, show it to some friends. We do focus groups with our podcast. We'll create it and share it with a group and get feedback. You could do that with your portfolio before you hit live. Show it to your professor, show it to a peer, say, what do you think? Be honest, and get some feedback. And hopefully that gives you the confidence to feel good about finally hitting publish and then sending it out.
Sure, and really to add on to that, one of the things I always tell people is, if you're ever nervous about, hey, am I putting out the right thing? Should I be putting out things? Because we all are in that boat. It doesn't matter how many years you've spent doing this. We all feel the emotions at the end of the day. Is like, make use of systems. Like, one of the early things I did with my students was I said, do a CV, but don't do it in a way that I'm trying to employ you. Like, if you had to sit on your own and say, okay, I am this person, what have I done? Make a CV for yourself. And then almost everything you do, from every piece of artwork to, maybe one time you went to this event and spoke for 2 minutes, put everything, like, jot your whole life down. And, use that, right? Edit your CV, edit it the way you want. And then after that, stick to it, commit to it, and start building your brand touch points, whether it be your website, your social media, because the mindset then becomes a little better, because it's not, okay, every time I'm doing something new, I got to think about what's the best way to present myself, versus this is the information I have. This is what I've committed to right now. Let me find a way to translate it to the best ability. So it almost becomes like a school assignment that you do for yourself, not for marks. And getting to a more like internal angle. One of the people that I really like to hear, and also had a chance to speak with recently is Chris Do. He's one of the
Okay.
gurus in the brand space. It's interesting because he said the definition of personal branding has changed for me as I've evolved. He said that at the beginning, it was about the world. It was about putting myself out in the best way for opportunity. And then he says, nowadays, now that I've seen what I've had to see in life, I really see personal branding as a way of like understanding my own self. And I don't think we talk about that too much because we always think that, oh, I am not good enough to put stuff up. But where's that comparison coming from? Who are you comparing yourself to? How do we know what's going on in the mind? Because the person that you're comparing yourself to, they have a comparison point to someone else,
Sure.
right? So I think changing the narrative to say, let me find a way to explore my own self through my personal brand is a better exercise. And that's even more frightening, by the way, because it forces you to really add a lot of clarity to your life in places that you may not want to go. But I'd say, like, take the world away for just a brief second, make a personal brand that's for you, and then you'll find ways to tweak it for the world.